I want to head back to Washington, bring David back in. So that was our correspondent in Havana talking there. What's your reaction to what he's been saying?
Yeah, I do think Marco Rubio, as ever, is a pivotal figure in all of this. And we've been saying that also about the peace negotiations in Ukraine, where Rubio is seen by some as a voice of sanity or the most pro-Ukrainian figure there. He has taken a huge interest, obviously, in Cuba and Venezuela, and I suspect is hugely supportive of what's happened in the last few hours, and we're already seeing that in his social media accounts. All of this will be fascinating to watch as well in Marco Rubio's home state of Florida, now also Donald Trump's adopted home state, where there is a big Cuban community. And I think in the coming days, coming hours, we're going to just sort of come to terms with the impact of this, the ramifications within the US and the broader region, and what does it mean for other strongmen leaders in these countries? Does suddenly the US feel it has the right to go in and depose them? What are the implications of that for international law? There's already been some commentary of will this make the US hypocritical if another country carries out an action like this? For example, China with Taiwan. So again, a lot of focus on Trump's upcoming press conference, I think, and we shall see how politicians in Washington respond to this. Certainly, already from the Republican Party, some are expressing support for Donald Trump as the only president who could get this done. We've seen other presidents obviously criticize Maduro and his predecessors, but Trump was the one who actually took action here. However, others say this is yet another example of Trump's authoritarian tendencies, that he is acting almost unilaterally without consulting Congress. I think many members of Congress had no idea this was happening. So expect to hear more criticism of him and Marco Rubio on that account.
Thank you, David. Stay with us. I'm going to ask Shirli Sitbon to come back in and discuss this further. So we're a year into Donald Trump's term. We've seen him take a lot of unilateral actions, as David was just mentioning. Congress maybe didn't even know here. However, when he came into office, he said he wanted to be a president of peace. But his actions don't seem to go with his words.
Well, if I were to speak for Donald Trump, I would say these actions are a way of achieving his purposes. He can always justify this, although this is obviously a military strike, and everybody, even his allies in Europe, see this as something that goes against international law. I was looking at the reactions, and the one that strikes out, because most countries have either condemned, expressed concern, or have been monitoring this very closely. That was a reaction we've heard from many people, many world leaders. But Argentina's President Milei said, freedom advances, long live freedom. So we're seeing this ally of Donald Trump backing him. This is only reaction in that direction, clear backing. But yes, Donald Trump saying that he's the president of peace, that he doesn't want to be involved in wars, to push forward wars. He criticized so many past presidents who have acted to change regimes, and saying that that is not the way where he's going. That's not the way he wanted to govern the U.S. Campaigning massively on that agenda, and now going, making a U-turn, going in the opposite direction, but still trying to justify it. But now the people who voted for him, saying that they wanted him to focus on U.S. issues, they have been criticizing him for months now for his involvement in various wars, for the 12-day war, between Iran and Israel, the fact that the U.S. participated in this in various other, arenas in the world. His supporters not, staying faithful to the old Donald Trump narrative. And he's, of course, saying that he still believes that he's the president of peace, saying he deserves the Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize. But many people seeing this as the exact, perhaps opposite. Of course, when you look at people in Venezuela, in the opposition, we're still waiting to see how this will evolve, and they have not condemned this. And actually, the pressures he's been showing in recent months, they said that for those pressures against Nicolas Maduro and his government. And one more word, perhaps, about that these Venezuelan authorities, the ICC has been investigating them and Nicolas Maduro himself for a human rights violation. So many people looking at that, Europeans, though, the European Union saying that although they do not believe that he's the legitimate leader because of recent elections, they still believe that international law must be abided by.
And David, I want to bring you back in and ask a follow-up question here. We're talking about Donald Trump's foreign policy, and as you mentioned, how he possibly bypassed Congress to carry out these actions. And now we're left with a bit of a power vacuum in Venezuela. And with the officials saying objective achieved since they've removed Maduro. What happens in Venezuela now?
Oh, well, that's a great question. And I think critics of Trump and US foreign policy generally will worry that they haven't necessarily thought that through. And history is littered with examples, including obviously US interference in Latin America in the past, and perhaps most notoriously the Iraq war, where the main objective is achieved and a leader is removed from power, but then there is a vacuum, and there has not been a properly considered plan for what should come next. I've seen reports that certainly the view of many Venezuelans, their theory of America's approach to this is that they are hoping that the opposition and people will take to the streets and step up and take power. But at the same time, just because Maduro is gone, of course, does not mean that the entire Venezuelan government has fallen. We're hearing from the vice president, the attorney general, and so on. And I think that is a question that certainly should be put to Trump at his press conference in a few hours. Where does Venezuela go from here, and what role is the US willing to play or not play in it? We've heard from a Democratic Senator, Andy Kim, saying that a few months ago he looked Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, and Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, in the eye and asked, is this about regime change? And apparently Rubio assured them not, but he is somewhat now doubtful of that response. And again, given America's long history of interfering in overseas governments, I think there'll be widespread scrutiny now of whether the US is just abandoning Venezuela or is going to play some sort of positive role there.
David, thank you so much for being with us, keeping us updated on this developing story. Finish with you, Shirley. So we've been, discussing everything that's happened in Venezuela. We're all waiting for that press conference to maybe give us some more clarity. We've talked about international reaction. In the coming days, how do you think Donald Trump is going to be judged for what he's carried out in Venezuela today?
Well, I think it will depend also on what we see on the ground in Venezuela. If the situation, not going to speculate on what can happen, but if it turns, chaotic more than organized, if we don't see any result that leads to a quiet transition, well, criticism will escalate in the U.S. and elsewhere, and maybe we can see, more calls to find some way to mediate a solution. I don't know how, perhaps help the situation de-escalate, remain calm, and help Venezuelans resume their lives. Now, perhaps with the change, now will the U.S. change their attitude towards Venezuela? Will they wait for a full regime change, or will they start, waving away, getting rid of all these sanctions, which have also made the situation difficult in Venezuela? We'll be monitoring this. We'll see how it happens. But yes, there will be criticism, and of course, then there will be those Donald Trump's allies who will applaud, will say that was the way to go, that Nicolas Maduro was cracking down on the opposition, and many in Venezuela, that 8 million Venezuelans have had to leave the country because of the situation there, about a quarter of the population, perhaps a bit more. So yes, there'll be criticism. At the same time, people who applaud and trying to find justification for this, and then those who try to monitor this back to some kind of reasonable way out of this crisis, helping Venezuelans out. We'll be following this, and also what will happen perhaps at the UN. We've said this, Colombia is now a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. They're allowed to ask for a discussion, an emergency discussion on this. We'll see what comes out of that.
Shirley, thank you so much for sharing your analysis with us as we take a look at what has been happening in Venezuela all morning.